Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Dave Albert. In this show, I talk about technology, building a company as a CTO and co-founder, and have guests to discuss their roles in technology and entrepreneurship. Hi, folks, and today we are joined by Brian Holohan and Jennifer Griffin of Turn2me e-mental health. Thanks for joining me, Brian and Jennifer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Jennifer, would you give us a little bit of an introduction about you first?
Sure, yep. No problem, Dave. My name is Jennifer Griffin. I'm a psychotherapist and counselor and general manager of Turn2me e-mental health. And I've been working with the organization since the summer. I work with adults, individuals, and teenagers 16 plus, and also couples as well, around a lot of ranges of different mental health needs, depending on what people are struggling with.
All right, thank you. And you, Brian?
I'm Brian. I'm a counsellor psychotherapist as well. I've been working with Turn2me for about 4.5 years. Started as a volunteer counsellor and have over a year ago took over as a clinical manager, working with clients online and also in private practice as well. Yeah.
All right, great. I'm really happy that you two were able to make time to join us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
It's great to be here.
Great. So maybe if you could give me a little bit of background on Turn2me and how it got started, what it's about.
Mm-hmm. Turn2me started we're actually in our 10th year this year, and It started as a result of tragic circumstances with our founders, Oisin and Diarmuid Scollard, who lost their own brother to suicide 10 years ago. They felt that because he'd been looking around for supports and that there wasn't enough kind of services available, that they kind of came up with this concept of an online format to be able to kind of provide services outside of the normal kind of hours. Typically kind of people, you can only get sick between Monday to Friday.
Yeah.
This idea of being able to kind of access mental health support, mental health services, peer-to-peer support, online so that it's easier accessible. And that's where it kind of started. And over the years, we've kind of had volunteers, we've kind of developed and kind of grown the service itself. And we've also grown the platform that we use as well. And we now have a 3-tier model of e-mental health support, which is a thought catcher service, which is around peer-to-peer support. It's anonymous. You can post what's happening for you, a situation that's going on, your response to that, and then other members can actually kind of give you support and offer, kind of similar in a way to a Facebook kind of thing, where they can actually kind of click a like or give a little support kind of button on it. That's 365 days a year, 24/7, people can access that. The next tier that we have is online support groups, and these are facilitated by mental health professionals. They're topic specific on things like anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts and feelings, managing stress, managing anger, family conflicts, LGBTQ, all of these, and they're adaptable to kind of suit the needs of the community that actually join. These are anonymous groups again, and it's all about supporting people in the idea of finding ways that can actually help them to kind of manage anxiety themselves, empowering people and making them feel that they can actually take ideas that are shared with other people that they've found that work for them, and then using those in their own kind of day-to-day life. From that, then we have a third tier, which is the one-to-one online counselling. And this is free to members in Ireland. Outside of Ireland, because we're a registered charity, we're funded through the HSE and NOSP to be able to kind of provide sessions in Ireland. But we do have members from outside of Ireland across the world that can access it on a donation per session basis. And it's done over video, live chat, which is instant messaging, or email sessions. And we also have telephone counselling.
Yeah, that's it. And as Brian is saying, a really key part of what we do is working online is really heightens the accessibility of the service. So not just in terms of where you feel most comfortable to engage, your location, the time of day, and so forth, but also because it's anonymous, it actually just helps people to feel a little bit more comfortable coming forward and trying out counselling, because this is actually something that our co-founders Oisin and Dermot discovered with their own brother, and it's something that we're very passionate about reducing stigma and any sense of shame or embarrassment of coming forward and getting your mental health needs met. And this really just kind of facilitates that ability for people to kind of be able to reach out for support without any kind of worry or concern about being judged. And usually people find, especially very attractive across the board to all genders, but we do actually happen to, engage a lot more male members of our community for that reason, because as you know, men will sometimes struggle a little bit more around this kind of concern.
Sure.
And other kind of members of the community, so LGBTQ plus members of the community also can feel much more free and kind of that they can actually engage with the service in this way without feeling that they need to kind of come out or to kind of share aspects of their experience.
And that's the thing. It's accessible over iPads, tablets, mobile phones, laptops. You can be sitting on a train or sitting on a bus, and you can access an online support group, or you can access the Thought Catcher, or have a one-to-one counselling session.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people kind of engage in the online email sessions one-to-one, so they kind of access those at times that works best for them.
Yeah.
So they're able to send it at 2:00 in the morning. I'll log in the next morning and actually be able to see it and respond to them, but it fits around your own schedule, which makes it very accessible for everybody to engage with.
Well, that's fantastic. In being a member of the startup community, being a co-founder and part of the technical community, it's a very much needed service. There's such a lack of understanding of mental health in both of those spaces. And I think not just that, but it's almost a detriment to people if they bring up their mental health. When we were starting up the company, I went from getting insurance from the people I worked for to basically having to do it for myself. And the queries about all the things that could possibly affect the way insurance works. Have you ever had anxiety? Have you ever had any mental health? Have you ever had to take any medication for mental health? That almost, to me, seems counterproductive in that it will drive people who actually are at risk underground, which turns into being a bigger burden on the insurance companies than if people were, given the opportunity to discuss and solve their problems in the open.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. I mean, it's a much needed service, and to be able to just dial in and when it suits you, and try out as Brian said, there's so many different formats as well, that you can actually engage with. So you might feel a little bit kind of reticent about maybe doing a face-to-face session via our video counseling or the phone sessions. You can actually engage with instant chat, and then as you develop the relationship with your counselor, you can decide to kind of shift into a different format, if you like, and it's all private and confidential.
Absolutely.
To the site.
That's really nice. I especially like the asynchronous communication ability.
Yeah.
Especially as a startup founder. Yeah. You never know when you're really going to have time.
Yeah. Well, the one thing about it is that technically, you develop a relationship with your laptop, because you spend so much time working with that. You're glued to it. It becomes an extension of you. So, I've had clients, especially across lunchtime, during the workday, and you could be sitting in an office space, having your sandwich at your desk. People don't realize, but you can actually be engaged in an online live chat counseling session. So you're getting your support. You're doing it on your lunch break. Nobody knows what you're doing. You're still sitting at the computer, but you're actually using it for something that's actually helping you to maybe process things, dealing with the work situation, or dealing with the isolation. Because that's the other thing. If, you know, we live in a world of communication, but we don't communicate in the same way that we used to. Everything is kind of posted online, and it's kind of fake and all of that. So if we're able to kind of turn it around and use the online space as a way to engage somebody in finding support, you know, peer support is a really, really important part of it, because then you kind of realize you're not actually alone. It might be the first time that you kind of talk about, you know, I'm feeling depressed, or I'm feeling anxious, you know, or I don't know how I'm feeling. And other members can actually come along and point you in a direction that might actually help you. You may not need counselling, but you might benefit from being in a group with other members, anonymously talking about what's happening, finding out ways that can actually support you.
Yeah,
it's a really accessible kind of thing. It's
Absolutely.
good to have it.
Sorry, but and also, like you were saying about on the train or on the bus or whatever, but it could also be at a situation that triggers an emotional event within a person. So if they're in a crowded place or a bus, which can get to anybody with any level of mental health, being on public transport can trigger you in some way. But to be able to, instead of, I don't know, staying inside your head and spiraling out of control, to be able to, you know, reach out to your peers, online peers, or
you can share that thought. You're sitting on the bus and you're kind of going, okay, I really do not want to be here. I feel really, really anxious. And what is the situation? I'm on the bus to work. And then your response to that is join Turn2me to chat to somebody. And then other people will see that and kind of go, I know how you feel. You know, have you thought of this, or just breathe, or, you know, take it easy. That kind of idea helps to distract the person and actually makes them feel a little bit more connected, rather than the isolation that you can feel on a packed bus, you know?
Yeah. And as you said, Dave, as well, just linking in with your points, especially around the tech community and startup founders, you know, the amount of pressure on people in this line of work. And the beauty of this way of working is that you can schedule, you know, to engage on multiple levels at different times. It's actually all of us who are actually probably the most busy, who have less time for counselling, that actually need it the most. And we speak as people who are very busy ourselves, you know, and actually that's always a bit of a warning sign, you know, when you start to see that basic needs that you have can't be, you know, scheduled in because you just got so much family pressure, so much work pressure. You know, these are the things that we kind of put aside, our physical health, our mental health, of course, all integrated anyway, both of those. That's actually a little bit of a kind of a little friendly red flag that actually it's probably time to try to connect in and get your needs met. And I think that's what's great about this. You know, as Brian said, you can just go on and have a chat with peers. You can join a group. You can kind of engage in one-to-one free counseling with instant chat or any other format that feels right for you, without feeling that you have to put that aside and not kind of prioritize your health.
That's really good. So for the listeners, I happened to find a flyer at the copy machine here at our WeWork offices, where we are both tenants, and just happened to reach out asking, you know, what the story, what the service was, to get a little bit more of an understanding, and then thought, hey, I should talk to them on the podcast to, to try to get the word out to people like us, startup founders, technical people who are under more pressure than the typical person, which not that necessarily means that you're at more risk or anything, but that if you were ever at risk, this type of situation will definitely bring it out in you.
Yeah, it's so true. And also, just like you will obviously be able to talk so much more meaningfully than we will on this. But I think also, you know, again, we're kind of in the tech world ourselves, so we have a little bit of understanding. But I think also the kind of the pressure, you know, either conscious or unconscious, you know, to kind of move fast and break things or make stuff happen against the odds. You know, this is another kind of aspect of the tech philosophy, again, which is part of the way we work as well. You know, we're constantly pressuring and kind of stretching ourselves, possibly beyond maybe human limits, and we like to do that, and we're aware that we do that, and there's the creative excitement around that. But we also have to kind of keep that balanced in with our health needs, and I think sometimes we tend to kind of push ourselves a little bit beyond the limit. It doesn't mean we're not going to continue to try to do that, but we can, by engaging with mental health services, again, completely confidentially, anonymously online, we can make sure that actually we kind of keep the show on the road, without feeling that we actually are in danger of having any type of kind of breakdown or anything like that. Because these things kind of, all of a sudden, everything's working, everything's fine, and then all of a sudden one morning you wake up and, you can't get up, or you can't, you just feel that you're just not functioning. And what we want to do, and this is why having a preventative service like what we have, we can kind of get in there early, and the counselor and peer support and groups will be able to kind of spot, I think, you might actually need a little bit of extra support here, or a couple of lifestyle, tweaks, that could really help you there to be able to do what you love to do without feeling that you're risking your health.
Yeah, that's so not just the break things and move quickly, but also, at least from a lot of the technical side, you spend most of the day being wrong. And it's not, you just make mistake after mistake after mistake until you fail to success. So that can actually be, I guess, I don't know the technical chemicals in your brain, but the serotonin and the dopamine.
Yeah.
So you get those wins, but you get so many of the negatives that if you don't have the right mental framework, then it can take a toll on you over the many years that I've had in this.
That's a really good point, actually, in terms of self-esteem. And again, it's so subtle that you don't necessarily notice it happening. And I think, a lot of us will say, oh, well, I can handle that. Oh yeah, I can take that. I can take that feedback. And actually, if we're being honest with ourselves, sometimes, maybe it's affecting us more than we actually consciously are aware of,
I can imagine.
And that's where the importance of kind of looking after yourself, because, okay, is it Edison or one of these who allegedly said, it wasn't that I failed 1,000 times. I discovered 1,000 ways how not to do it. And then 1,000, the one time that I actually did get it to work. And it is a mindset, but at the same time, when you're up against a deadline or trying to get stuff done, and you're constantly kind of hitting that wall, it is difficult. And that's why, it's always good to be able to kind of step back for a little bit, take a deep breath, kind of, regroup. And that's where kind of the idea of Turn2me can actually be a really good help, because even stepping away for a moment from what you're doing, giving yourself a bit of a breather, and then getting back into it can actually help even refresh the way you're looking at something, get a little bit of support from, other members, that kind of thing, even just being able to vent what's happening. In a good, safe space.
That's a really good point, actually. It's just in terms of how the brain works, because when we're really stressed, our brain really isn't, no matter how clever and intelligent and creative we are, it's like that kind of moment in the shower, when all of a sudden the solution kind of pops up when you least expect it, and this is why exercising, connecting in with groups, doing other stuff sometimes is actually not only good for our health, but actually really helps us creatively, to open up the prefrontal cortex and get other kind of ideas of how this problem might be solved, and so that's actually a very important part.
Important kind of thing, especially if you're, as you said, David, startups and being under pressure and having to kind of do things, and more than likely the really long hours and all of that goes with it. And if there's isolation and you're kind of trying to do things yourself, when you are looking at stuff, and we do it ourselves, because we look at the computer, for so long during the day, and we value the point where we get up and say, right, let's go get a quick coffee here and just get a break away from what we're doing. And it kind of refreshes us to be able to kind of go, okay, now we can come back here and the brain is going to start working again. We understand that. And we're only looking at this. So we don't understand the world of coding or anything like that, which I can only imagine is more intense in itself.
I don't know if it would be more intense. I'm thinking of trying to debug people.
Exactly. Yeah, and we embrace the bugs. That's one different, actually. We embrace the bugs of people because that's actually what makes us unique. You know, otherwise we'd be cyborgs or robots. So we like those bugs. We don't like the tech bugs, but we love the human bugs. But yeah, and I think also just again, like thinking about the pressures on people within the tech community, this idea that, you know, which is a kind of fantasy out in the world outside of tech, that everything should just work seamlessly. Everything should just work because it's technology rather than humans. It's humans that actually, you know, are the difficult ones, but the technology should work. But tech people, humans behind the tech, are actually having to deal with all of that pressure as well, that this needs to work seamlessly at all times. You know, and that's a kind of enormous pressure for people to be living under. And I've gone grey in this work, dealing with some of the tech bugs. So I could just imagine.
It doesn't show. So.
Good, exactly. And you won't be able to see me anyway, so that's good. So, but anyway, it's just something for us to be aware of and then to take care of.
I mean, even in the times we live in, it's even, I'd say it's got to be even more of an issue because there's so much coming at all of us all the time. There's so many channels of communication. There's so many different methods of input, you know, the beyond what anybody, 10, 15 years ago had. There's there's more news, with air quotes, coming into you. So, you know, the world is getting safer, but it seems like it's getting less safe because you hear about more catastrophe. Where, you know, 20 years ago, you may know of the 3 or 4 stories on whichever news station you watched that came on for 1/2 hour to maybe an hour a day, as opposed to every single thing that goes wrong in the world coming at you through Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, just the people talking about it at the water cooler who also got it through all those channels. So there's just, it's like people just weren't designed to have this much input. And so I think that's got to contribute to the rising
big time
levels of depression and anxiety.
Actually, and that is a really good point, because it's actually one of the key features of depression and anxiety is social comparison. You know, so we feel that, and especially in a kind of tech startup world, you know, it is very competitive. There's a lot of comparisons around, you know, what's being achieved and how and when, and, you know, success and pressure to succeed. And that really is, you know, a major trigger for any kind of mental health distress is when we feel that there's something wrong with us, or there's, you know, something that's not working for us because of comparing ourselves to others. And when these messages are being bombarded either through social networks or through our own communities and our startup communities or entrepreneurial communities, you know, we really need to kind of step back from that as well.
That's kind of how your service of the message board is the opposite of social media almost.
True, actually.
I'm not better than you. I'm there too.
Yeah, exactly.
I was talking to someone yesterday, and I can't remember how the conversation came up, but both of us are well past the entry to adulthood, and we both are still, we can't believe that we're supposed to be adults. When did that happen? So it's good to know that there are other people. So, you know, thinking in your head, I shouldn't be an adult. I do my job really well. I think this podcast goes pretty well. But I'm responsible for the kids that we're raising. There is no, you know, no other layer of, whoops, I'm in the real world now. And I mean, you know, I'm in my mid-40s almost. So, but talking to someone else and hearing them say, yeah, I feel the exact same way. How are we in charge now?
Exactly. Ruling the world as well, actually. That's a big...
And that's the thing, knowing that you're actually not alone with that way of thinking. And, you know, otherwise people go around and never say that to anybody because, you know...
On my Instagram, I have everything together. On, you know, exactly. It's
on our site.
All
you see to be the opposite.
Exactly. All you see on Facebook is the good stuff, or the absolute moniest stuff, not the Today was kind of rough, but it was all right. I had some good stuff. I had some bad. Yeah. So just like most people do every day, is some good, some bad. But you only see these extremes. And so true. Having a site like this where people can commiserate in a productive way.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah, because in counseling, actually, and therapy, there are no good and bad emotions. Everything's neutral from that point of view. Everything is equally valid. Any kind of feeling, any kind of experience is actually human, and it's all a kind of an important communication of a kind, you know, that we can kind of spend time to kind of slow down and actually try to understand, okay, I'm feeling, you know, a little bit tense right now, or I'm feeling under pressure, or I'm feeling, you know, like a big kid refusing to not wanting to grow up, or feeling bored, or whatever it is. And I'm feeling really excited. I'm really happy. It's not all doom and gloom. We can share all of our kind of positive, excited feelings or anything like that, but they're all part of the human repertoire, and they're all equally valid and welcome. And something that I think is a great kind of relief when you come into counseling, to realize that there is no judgment around any of our feelings or experiences. You know, it's all part of being alive.
What you just said there, it reminds me of the kind of the philosophies of meditation, of not pushing out thoughts, but recognizing the thoughts and then letting them go. So it seems like it's similar with the emotions, with a little bit more of a recognize it, understand it, and maybe if there is something that you can do to address the underlying concern of it, then take some actions. So it's not exactly the same as just let the thought go by, but to not fight the emotions.
Yeah, and not to judge. So that's really where the mindfulness comes in that way. It's like, it would be very similar to you know, counseling and psychotherapy. You know, there's no judgment around the emotions. We kind of develop a sense of insight into what we're experiencing without judgment. But then actually what we do is we attune ourselves into what those emotions are actually telling us. And even boredom. Boredom is such an important emotion as well, that sometimes we can actually ignore.
What's boredom again?
Yeah, exactly. And it'll be different for every single person. And hopefully you're not bored listening to this conversation from me. But you know, it's actually a really important thing that we can tend to kind of, you know, not pay attention to. But actually it's such an important feeling that's saying, you know what, something is not quite right. I'm not kind of really feeling, you know, my best, or I'm not feeling fully satisfied in my life. And, you know, it's one of those emotions that we could then start turning to something else. To give us something exciting. We can become workaholics. We can turn to alcohol. We can turn to sex. We can talk to too much shopping, whatever it might be. You know, these are the kind of things that we will, you know, maybe turn to deal with those emotions. So if we can kind of bring it out into the open, either getting peer support or into a group or one-to-one, then we can kind of start to see what the emotion is, and then how we've been kind of working and handling it that might be making things worse for ourselves. The actual emotion itself is not the problem. It's often how we're handling it that is actually kind of not helping us. The emotion is fine. And we just need to kind of, you know, hear and listen and get its needs met, really, in more adaptive or healthy ways.
And here I was thinking, I wish I could get addicted to exercise and cleaning house. But then, I mean, you know, that would not be an actual solution long term. That's right. Totally a joke. Listeners, don't.
Get addicted to online counseling. You know, that's fine. Even that, actually, we're actually probably the only professionals that actually celebrate when people don't actually want to engage with us anymore. That actually means that everyone's happy and feeling good, and we support people around all of that. So we'll be the first ones to notice, actually, you know what? Actually, you know, you're grand. You don't, you know, join a group if you like, you know, go online, continue to kind of connect with your peers, but, you know, you're fine. You don't need any more counseling, you know?
Yeah, that must be great.
It is,
we celebrate that.
It's the rewarding kind of side of it.
When we become obsolete. You know?
What is the typical journey that one of your clients would have, or so would they typically come in through the message boards or through the online sessions, or are there just different types of journeys?
There's I suppose like any member that would join, you register. It's anonymous, so you can sign up. Some people come in because they've done a Google search for online counselling, and they kind of tend to bypass the other two, the Thought Catcher and the online support group, and they go straight for counselling. And what happens is, you're able to avail of up to 8 free sessions in Ireland. It's down to the funding that we have. But what happens is, sessions are held over, once a week, and it's done with professional counsellors. But typically within the first session, if somebody's coming, let's say, with depression, and they may not even have a diagnosis themselves, they're depressed and they're saying that themselves, we would kind of work with them within that first session to see how they are, see what supports they need, what they're hoping to get from the sessions, and then actually kind of bring their attention to the idea that they can join one of the online support groups on depression between the sessions, so that they're kind of getting this, wraparound kind of additional support between the sessions that they have, and let them be aware of the Thought Catcher service and that kind of side of it, so that they're not just coming into a session and feeling that they have no support outside of that. Whereas typically what happens is, in face-to-face counselling, and we're not trying to replace that at all, we're kind of augmenting that and being an addition to it. But you would come to see a counsellor face-to-face, you'd work with them, but then you won't see them for another week, and you may not have any other kind of supports outside of that. Whereas the service that we have is all around that ability to be able to kind of engage people with, peer support and online group support, and then have sessions to kind of follow up on after that. Not everybody needs the 8 sessions. Some people may only kind of come for maybe 4 sessions, and they might kind of find that actually I'm now able to deal with the family conflict at home, or I've resolved things, I'm not as heartbroken over the breakup of the relationship, or whatever it might be, maybe anger or something like that. And then there are others that may actually benefit from continuing on, and they have an option to continue on with us, or they would have an option that we would kind of refer them maybe on to their GP or face-to-face counselling if that's what they kind of need. Yeah,
and basically that's the beauty of the system, the 3-tier model that we have. We can meet clients' needs wherever they're at. Yeah. So, as you say, come through the message board and the peer support, you might discover something there, or the other way around, you might think, I really need one-to-one counselling, and then, as Brian said, I can join a group, or I can actually also kind of use the online tools as well. So it really depends. So the online tools and the groups are free for everybody, and it's just the one-to-ones that there would be a small donation, which is very, very low compared to usual fees for people outside of Ireland. So it really depends. And the other great thing about it is that you don't need to know what you're feeling. This is another thing that, the diagnostic model sometimes can cause difficulties for people. All you need to know is I'm just not feeling myself. I don't need to know whether I'm stressed or down or depressed or anxious or all of the above.
Yeah.
All we need to know to engage is that I'm just not feeling myself. Something just doesn't feel right. I might want to explore what that is, and I can go and meet a counsellor one-to-one if I like, and find out, without any kind of need to do any homework or to know anything about it, just to be able to share and open up, and then the counsellor will support you to understand your experience, and then help you, link in with other supports if it will be useful.
Yeah, as you say, it's kind of it's a nice way to kind of dip your toe into it. If you've kind of been afraid of the idea of actually making an appointment to see a counsellor, this service makes it more accessible, because you're not actually looking at the counsellor unless you choose video. You're actually able to engage with them in a live instant chat messaging private chat box, and then you can find that you can actually open up and talk about things that maybe you wouldn't have talked about before. So it helps to break the stigma a little bit. It kind of opens people up to be able to kind of go, well, actually now I've talked about this, it doesn't seem as scary anymore. And that's why the peer support is a really important thing, because as you said, David, the idea of knowing that you're not the only person that kind of feels like, adulthood. But it's this kind of way of realizing that actually, I can come onto this message board and actually post a comment about how I'm really feeling. It's anonymous. And rather than having to kind of pretend to be feeling wonderful on Instagram or anything like that. The idea that I could be real and then suddenly find that actually there's a string of other people that are there able to say, yep, have you done this?
Yeah.
I'm there and know exactly how you feel.
Yeah,
and that's reassuring.
It really is, and it's very moving as well, because you have an experience of being accepted for who you are, as a unique human being, experiencing, a range of different feelings like all of us, and it's about that kind of acceptance. It's kind of not only non-judgmental, but you really get a sense that it's actually okay to be who you are and what you're experiencing, and to have that freedom to explore what that means, in an open way, to help you understand your experience. It can actually be very enjoyable. It's not something that has to be painful or difficult. Yeah. Sometimes we feel some pain when we're going through this process, but it's a creative kind of opportunity to understand what that is and to channel that in a way that will actually, help us to live the life we want to live.
Yeah.
And the pain of working through it overall has to improve the situation, as opposed to leaving it and hoping it goes away and the situation getting worse and worse, and then you actually end up with more pain than if you'd have sorted the problem.
That's it. I mean, it's about the emotion and
addressed it.
See, the pain is not the problem. It's actually how we're kind of either avoiding it or not dealing with it, or finding other kind of ways of managing it that actually is making us worse, feel worse. So the pain itself is not a problem. Yeah. It's usually how we respond to it, or not, as the case may be. Yeah. So,
What are the plans for Turn2me over, I don't know, the next year, 2 years, 5 years?
Take over the world.
Yeah, exactly. World domination plans. We're constantly innovating and creating, and as this is why we have to mind our own health as well, because we've got so many ideas and so many things we want to do that we also have to, to get all of our kind of support needs met as well. So quite a few. We're going to be launching a youth service for ages 13 plus. Yeah. We're also developing a service for couples as well, because this is another kind of issue. Couples have a difficulty getting couple counseling and therapy because accessibility needs and time and space and scheduling and all that. You can imagine if you're just one person trying to schedule in mental health appointments, but two people who are in a relationship who work in tech as well. That's another whole kind of area that can be difficult.
Or for those with entrepreneurial widows and widowers.
That's right.
So
that's
my
true.
Poor wife will probably want us to do this, since I'm sure she feels like a single mother of 3.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point.
We have very little. We have no family here in Ireland, being both from the U.S. and I work constantly. That's right. So I'm sure there's
a lot there.
Are some tools that we could use to improve that.
Yeah, exactly. And then we're very excited. We're developing kind of some new innovations with the Irish traveling community at the moment. Working with the community across Ireland to look at, again, what the barriers are for coming forward and engaging with mental health support, and looking at the whole service to see what can be better, what can be improved, what new ideas they have that they would like to see, so that it makes it easier for them to engage. So that's another really extremely important project that we've just started this year.
Great. For those that aren't from Ireland, can you talk just a little bit about what the traveling community is, just in general, just so that they can get an idea?
Yeah, well, actually, extremely important communities within our overall Irish community, and basically, the Irish traveler community kind of would experience probably some of the most stigma and kind of judgment and fear of coming forward because of the kind of institutional and community-based racism and bigotry towards the community.
The Irish travelling community and I suppose the Roma community would have been essentially nomadic and travelled around Ireland, and their life would have been, travelling to town and kind of repairing things or doing things like that. And because of their culture differs from, as they would call them, settled people, people living in houses and that, they have their own recognized language, they have their own culture, their own history, but at the same time they're ostracized an awful lot. They're no longer allowed to kind of pitch up a tent or a caravan at the side of the road in Ireland. They're designated halting sites, as they're called, where they can live. And the only way that they can actually embody their community of traveling and that kind of thing is that if they want to kind of decide that they're going to do almost like a house swap, in a sense, they will travel on the road with their caravan all the way up to another part of Ireland, and somebody else might travel on, and they do this during the summertime so that they kind of get to travel around. But it is a culture that they've been fighting for decades for recognition. There's unfortunately a high kind of rate of suicide with traveling men, males from the community. And like with a lot of men across the board, and in all aspects, they're reluctant to engage in, counselling or support. They don't tend to talk about these things. So the idea that the service that we're looking to build with the community is so that we can kind of maybe find a way to actually bridge that gap to be able to help them engage, and maybe, as they're moving around different areas, that they mightn't have access to face-to-face counselling, but that we can actually try and support that in a way that will work for them. So we're kind of trying to innovate and that on it. So it's a huge kind of thing, but hugely exciting at the same time. Yeah.
Because that's the thing. It's not really, and you guys will know this much better than us, but it's not really a case that you just build something and people will come. We need to kind of look at, what barriers there are, for people, because the service is there for everybody, but there will be some kind of other barriers that make it difficult for people to come forward. And that's the thing. We don't want to kind of make assumptions that it's one size fits all. We need to look at where we need to innovate and engage.
Okay, great.
Well,
So before we wrap it up, because I think we're running out of time, what would you ask the listeners to do? What sorts of things should they do if they need the services, or if they actually don't think that they themselves need the service?
Well, we would invite everybody to check it out. The website is www.turn2me.org. Check it out. It's there. You never know. You might need it, or somebody else that might actually benefit from it. The one thing about it is it's about letting people be aware that there is supports out there. A lot of the time it's about, people don't tend to talk about how they feel and the issues of isolation and everything else. This is something that you can access anywhere, and that's it. It's just a way of reaching out to people.
Exactly. That's number one, is engaging with the support services that are there, and it's there 24/7, 365 days a year. So that's number one. And also members of the community, listeners, who want to get in touch with us and volunteer with us. We're always very happy to speak to like-minded people who can kind of work with us around maybe some tech innovations or some ideas or donations for anybody who might need kind of counselling out there, or some donations if people feel they want to make to help us to kind of improve the service and to innovate further. Because that's the one thing we do get funding for, to provide the counselling service, but on the technology side we've had to fund that ourselves because it's just not part of the traditional mental health model. So that's something that we want to continue to make sure we innovate. So any ideas or volunteering or donations, very gratefully received. And in that case, anybody who's interested, please do feel free to get in touch with Brian or myself via info@turn2me.org.
And I'll put all those, all the links in the show notes. But also, if any of you listeners have yourselves or anyone been affected by any sort of mental illness or issues that could have been helped with something like this, please share this. So, this has been around for 10 years. I've been in Ireland about 10 years, and I only happened on the existence because there was a flyer at a
Yeah.
copy machine.
Yes,
So
that's right.
share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, instead of some nonsense post that isn't true with fake news or whatever. Share this. Share, I mean, even if it's not the podcast episode, I don't care. Share the website, share their social media, share it everywhere you can, because you never know who you're going to help. You might actually save someone's life.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's actually a very good point. Absolutely. And it's just that kind of idea that's in your mind that you know that there's somewhere to turn in your moment of need. That's the central point.
Well,
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you.
Until next time, remember, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.